See it record in just a second. Okay, it says we are recording. Welcome to the SharePoint Users Group of DC. Tonight we have Larry on from Dan Solutions, and he is going to tell us where the federal market is going with Microsoft 365. Take her away, Larry.
How's it going, everybody? Pleasure to see all some familiar faces over here. I've been running this company myself and my business partner Jay have been running this company since 2007, so about 14 years now, just running in the federal market space, and seen, I think when it came to it, it was. SharePoint 2003 is when my business partner started on it. And keep in mind, I'm not the technical person. I'm more the business side type person. So I've been seeing it operate from from a financial aspect, from very early beginning stages of SharePoint 2003 to now. Now we are at Office 365 and the skill sets that go around it. And I was having a conversation with Scott earlier in regards to sort of how they treat SharePoint, and sometimes they treat it as, oh, it's just a web tool where you do some configurations and whatnot, and they treat it very poorly, which Scott is shaking his head to organizations that take it very seriously and put a lot of effort into it, can do some great work, and they treat their SharePoint people very well, and they pay them very well. So it is all around the gambit, between the two. A lot of people still don't understand it, but the market is hot for it, and the reason I say that is there aren't a lot of people that from a supply aspect of it, and you guys are a lot of the engineers and suppliers. There aren't a lot of people that just like go into it, because it's obviously not as sexy as I say, oh, go be a data scientist, or Joe's kind of shaking his head a little bit, but it's it's more from a jest standpoint, but it's one of those where it's semi weird, because it's necessary. Everyone essentially uses it. There's tons of applications that are built to do things similar to SharePoint, and then they collapse and fail, and then they go, well, why don't we just go back to SharePoint and run our business functions that way? And everyone tries to build some sex around it for a lot of these applications that get built, but the demands it's just high. It's much higher than I expected, when we were starting the company, and it's just growing. I constantly have the need for people. My ratio from when people start to the process to wanting to take a job with us to actually finishing and actually completing it is probably about 40%, which is a little low these days, because and it's no other, and it's not that I'm paying them less or anything like that. It's just the demand's so high. People get picked off. They can go and work a lot of these work from home jobs are there, and they're great, and they can happen, and they're not being quite shipped off to India quite yet. So you have a lot of people being paid pretty well to work from home and do these things. So we are in the federal market, so I'm talking about federal contracting, and the majority of what we do as a company is classified work. So generally the first question that we have is you're going to have to work at a skiff if you want to work here, and a lot of it, for the most part. I mean, I do have some jobs that don't require that, but that's sort of the sort of the first step of working that market. Now, and that's we've obviously been had some troubles, because there's a lot of companies out there that go, oh well, you don't in a commercial space you don't have to be there, and it's becoming less and less important to be in an actual office to be able to help people. A lot of it just becomes remote, so it's so you're competing against that, and the federal space is kind of half caught up. There are organizations that are taking it seriously, are increasing rates for that, and then there's others that aren't. So it's kind of a balance between the two, but I think most of them are sort of coming to an understanding that the demand for the people's high, and the supply is low, so we need to increase rates to be able to make that work, and hence those rates go to pay engineers such as yourself to do the work. The one thing about the federal space is it's always going to be uh, it generally rates don't collapse that often. So once it sort of hits hits a note, it'll stay within an equal range. But what ends up happening is if you're not on the federal space, which can suck, you get into you just big companies, and I know the big companies out there that as soon as they can ship a job to India, they will, because they can pay them $10 an hour. So there is that there's that aspect competing of it. So keeping your foot in the commercial side can be it's fun, but sometimes but the federal side is definitely safer, has a nice little longevity, and pays a premium over the length of a career. So that's where that we do have an advantage on that. We can pay the federal space can pay a little higher. Obviously, there's you're always going to find some eccentric person that's making an absurd amount of money for implementing 365 for basically a soccer company that's paying them. But those are kind of few and far between. Those don't last for a long period of time. If you go in the in the sort of commercial space around here, their rates are decently good, but they're generally short-term gigs. So you have to bounce from place to place to place. So those are a little harder to maintain. And I don't think the people are paid that much better. I'd actually say they're paid worse, because the people, in order to keep them employed, you have to have a pretty strong business development cycle that has to maintain those short-term gigs, right? So if you're working for a company that does 1 month to 3 month SharePoint and Office 365 implementations, they may charge $200-300 an hour to for your services, right? But there's a lot of overhead and a lot of business development that has to feed the beast to be able to maintain those engagements, and they have to have time that you're not going to be paid and on the bench, and they have to make sure that keep them from job to job to job, which previously was a little rough, because you had Scott, you could be in Baltimore one day, and then you'd be like, hey, I need you to go to Stafford, Virginia the other, and you're like, great, like that can be a little rough to go the Beltway or DC, so there's a little inconsistency there. So the plus sides of the federal markets, the contracts are much longer. They last anywhere between 1 to up to 10 years. With decent steady pay increases that happen over a long period of time. If you're new to it, and then you can jump up real fast, because once you have a couple good skills under you, you can move contracts, and do some different things, and the way they judge it. There are downsides. You can't work from home, and you can't unless you have a skiff in your house, and it is locked to certain locations. But there's positive and negatives to all of it. But in the federal space, specifically in SharePoint, it's exploding. I can't find enough people. I'm trying to grow them as much as I possibly can, and that's hard to do, because it's hard to go, hey, take a kid from college and be like, oh, I need you to learn how to do SharePoint. It's not it's something that you really do have to have a lot of experience, just touching, feeling, understanding what goes on, and it's really hard to learn that from a class. Most good SharePoint people don't read a book, just like most good home builders don't read a book to learn how to build a house. You have to actually build houses for years to build understand the nuances of of Office 365 and whatnot. So that's just it's harder to do. I'd say it's almost easier to it's sometimes easier to be a developer of another software in that instance. And then for a lot of people who don't understand it, a lot of the customers don't understand what they need. So, but bottom line, the demand's through the roof. People that are jumping into it are move up really fast, especially if you're good and understand the intuitiveness of how it operates, and go from there. So that's the fun side. Any questions so far? I see everyone has microphones on.
I just like to know, because when I saw you over the summer,
Yeah.
You said that your client was able to sponsor a couple clearances, for the right people and all. And I'm just wondering, i aside from the one client that I know of, are other customers looking at doing the same thing, where they're willing to do whatever it takes to get people. So if they've already got a secret, okay, we'll start processing them for a clearance, hold them on the bench for a while until we get them ready,
Yeah,
or
I mean
how's that looking?
it's really more based on the companies themselves. The companies are generally the ones that sponsor you, unless you become a GS employee, a government services employee. So generally, it's better to reach out to a company, reach out to me specifically, anybody here. It's sort of an open door. Hey, I'll get you cleared up and ready to go if you want to, up
Yeah,
to a CI polygraph. And I know I'm open to it. I just the fact that I need people is bottom line. Hey, there aren't that many people here. Generally, it's a pretty easy start off minimum 6-figure job if you do have maybe a 6 months years of experience. So
yeah,
and I'm like and I mean make that as a joke, but it's serious. It's like, hey guys, like that's the demand that exists over here. It's people you have a lot of crappy people that are making good money,
yeah,
but by doing this, you and Joe have met a lot of them. And you're like,
No names.
what? If no names are being used, but it's sort of a testament to the demand of what's sort of happening, and they'll accept mediocre just because they just they need people that desperately to be able to do the work. And so luckily we as a company can recognize good versus bad, and who's actually good, versus
yeah,
who's actually knows what they're doing versus bad. But a lot of them can't, and a lot of them can take it on and do really well with it. So I'd say even a lot of ways it's like you take a good hardworking person, who sort of can understand things and learn pretty quickly. You can do pretty well, and pick it up if need be. Not to say that you have to that it can be anybody, but if you have some sort of aptitude to be able to do this, to do it, and and have an appreciation for the Microsoft environment of what it is. So that's why. So clearance wise, yeah, clearances are no issues. They're all run by sort of an organization that's not attached to the customer anymore, which is actually very big. We
oh,
used to have. Yeah, so this is a new thing, Scott.
oh,
That I
yeah,
didn't know. Yeah, it's now run by an organization. I forgot the name. It's called DIS, but I forgot what it stands for.
DSS.
DISS. It's like
Okay,
defense something security.
yeah,
Basically it's a new acronym of the
no, I
same.
know who they are.
Yeah.
I used to work
They
for them.
yeah, exactly. They took the SCI functions away from the agencies themselves, because what ended up happening is I can clear people up to a top secret, right? And they'd say, cool, like now it's up to the agency to give you the security compartmented information clearance, right? And they would just sit on it for years. They wouldn't care, because they're like, oh well, unless it's like somebody else that I care about, or no, I'm not going to do that. So this took it out of their hands, and they said, okay, we're going to do that for you, because basically the security clearance itself is only 2 additional phone calls. So, a very, very, small amount of work to actually, get to that level. And so now I can get people up to that level real fast, without having the overbearing, agency customers, to do that. So clearing people that level is great. It's coming to bear where we're able to bring a lot of new people into the space, because those roadblocks are no longer there. Security operating. So it's a fantastic thing, and that's why I'm like, okay, cool. Let's bring new people to the table, get people employed, because it only helps them, right? Because they have a bigger supply of pool of people that can work there, and they're no longer beholden to the people that can just walk there and just happen to have a badge that can work there. And they're like, because that's basically a lot of what it used to be back in 2000, mid 2000s was, hey, you get the janitor and be like, you got a badge, okay, cool, let's see if you can do something else, because we need your help and whatnot. So that's that, not to say that there aren't good people that can do that, but that's the limited pool of supply that you're dealing with here.
No, I used to remember whenever it was really much the case that if they had a clearance, it was easier to train someone up rather than to
Yep.
get someone who is qualified and get them the clearance.
Yeah,
So
Yep.
that's awesome news to hear.
Yeah, that
yeah.
is great news.
Yeah. And then, the plus side is there's a lot of, going, let's just say, go down a level to the secret level. That is opening up to a lot more remote work. That's what I'm seeing now, that they do have, obviously in certain capabilities, they you can't, but they're open to a lot more ability to not have to be, specifically on site to do that, because, number one, a lot of times they don't have the space for the engineers, and two, they're like, well, you can just remote in, and, with the security protocols that you're able to build up, you're able to access it, and we're comfortable enough for you to do that.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of that's happening, on the, like, DoD side of things,
Mhm.
and that's where there's, we're seeing a pretty big positive space. I have a contract with the Navy, and we're doing a lot of people are just, remote in different areas, and that's a huge positive thing, that's able to, able to help people, and things are going pretty well in that contract, for the time being. That is, eventually
Mhm.
it's going to come to, hey, I need you to come to San Diego, or hey, I need you to,
Yeah.
fly to Navy Yard or something like that. So there's going to be, pros and cons to that overall, but, but that's all. There's also an aspect of that is, once you're allowed, and I'll give you the caveat to that, is the once you're allowed, to do that, then, the idea from a contractor side is, hey, you can now, I can find people anywhere. You're like, well, if I know a skilled person who lives in, northern Kansas, I can find them, and I can probably hire them for a lot less than I would have a heavy DC salary. So there's going to be, the same thing, the same concept of, engineers in India working for $10 an hour is the same concept of, it's not going to be as drastic, obviously, but, if you can spread out, spread out the work, there's some aspect to that they, that here they do pay you for DC, living in the DC area for DC type, salary, that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
and there's going to be a little bit of spreading out, I imagine, over the next 10 to 15 years of what's going to happen. So it's going to be a little bit of a high and a low, overall. But going back to the Genesis though, there are no, me. It's, I'm not, putting around the bush. It's there aren't a lot of people that are just jumping into it, that want to do it. It's not as sexy as going into data analytics, or it's going, or going to be a cloud engineer, right? And, woo, cloud engineer, right? And, that, but it's like, okay, well, Office 365, maybe there needs to be a rebranding. You're like the Office 365 cloud, and you're like cloud,
Well,
I
when
make
Well,
jokes, but
that's
you know what I mean.
yeah.
when you're looking at the rest of the M365 stuff and the security aspects and everything else, there is a lot more cloud engineering security kind of stuff that people should really know. And from what I gather, they don't.
Yeah, they
And
don't.
the government itself has no clue as
Yeah,
well, from what I hear.
yeah,
Um, my client, more positive than negative. Um, but I know that really the higher you go in the security clearance requirements, the harder it is to get really qualified people. And
very true.
so, like I used to say, whenever I was over at the agency, you know, in the land of the blind, the man with one eye is king. And so I was treated like I was God. And so it was very nice. It was definitely a boost to my self esteem. Um, and then whenever I was back around my peers who do this stuff for a living and speak at the conferences, I was humbled in my ignorance of how much I still don't know. Um, but I'll tell you, there are times whenever I kind of wish I was back there again. Just the ADHD of working from home, it's an issue. Uh, but and I love the company anyway. You all know that. That's why Joe's working there now. But
Yeah, very true. Very true.
I, but I'll say I have posted some of your job announcements out there, and I have people from India saying, "Hey, I have people who can fill these slots for you," and blah blah blah. Can you outsource it to our company? I'm like, do you not understand? We need
They
you to
know.
have a security clearance and a polygraph. And I'll take one. I don't think you understand what I'm getting at here, man.
U.S. citizen in the United States. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like it's amazing, in a way it's sad because I've met some very brilliant people, especially on my current team, who are not U.S. citizens, might have green card, a couple of them have H-1B visas, brilliant people, highly qualified. But the way that they are treated in this environment, their employers can, you know, it's not really good to them. I remember whenever I walked into one federal civilian agency for a couple months, people I was helping out before I started with Dan. Um, they were basically on those long folding tables, just packed right next to each other, doing the work in the hallway, and it just blew my mind. Like, you can't at least give them a bad cubicle. You have to sit them where they're elbow to elbow with everybody. Like,
Yeah.
that's bad. Um, would you say it's still better to be with the smaller companies than the bigger companies because the clients are still doing a lot of small business set asides?
I'd say it's. I think the small businesses probably will, over the long term, pay you better,
Yeah.
and I think they'll treat you a little bit better than the large ones. You know, a lot of the large ones are, they're not as, they're really just focused on, the sort of the contract PM side of things, and they really don't understand, the technology side of it, and they're just run numbers. And so that's where if you really specialize in skills, uh, even it sounds, it may feel like a big company is safer, but the reality is it's not. It's basically just as the same kind of risk, you're running into, and the smaller ones will probably pay you better, especially if you work for a company that's sort of specialized within your skill set. They know the market a little bit better, and they understand it, and they can negotiate better for you than you can with the larger company. So I'd say that's where it works out a little bit better between the two. So, but I mean, I'm biased though, obviously.
Yeah.
Being a small
Are
company.
Well,
are your customers requiring any certifications aside from Security Plus?
Uh, let's see. No, I mean, Security Plus is probably the number one. That's its requirement. Every for Office 365, not really. Again, it's one of those where it, it used to be, you have to have your MCSE. I think, remember, that was the big, the other one and whatnot. But now, honestly, for most people, I think they really don't care about it. It's nice to have a certification. It's nice to have, like, be a certified knowledge manager, and I think that's something that's very super positive to have, and it definitely helps. But it's never like that. I would say, and going to the Genesis, it's not a requirement, but it's one of those where it's nice to have. And certifications can help you. But actually, and I'll give you this a certification. A couple different certifications can help you if you don't have a college degree or something like that. Because that'll be my thing. Where if someone says, oh well, they don't have a college degree, I go, well, they have 3 or 4 certifications. They go, oh, okay, cool. And that's sort of what it
Yeah.
helps between the two. And the ironic part is those certifications probably take 3-4 weeks, and I'm like going to college degree 4 years, and $200,000 later, and you're like, I'll take the, I'd rather have the certificate. So yeah, and
Yeah.
that's another thing about this, this
There's a
profession.
whole strategy to passing that test. The most key one is just keep taking it over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's all I do.
That tends to work. You go in and fail badly, and then scribble down a bunch of stuff. Then you show up again as soon as you possibly can, and you do it again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there's another thing I should probably mention: how much in this profession, as much as it's nice to have, nobody really cares, if you went to college or how well you did in college or anything like that.
Yeah.
If you're a military guy, or if you just have experience, nobody looks, nobody cares. It's probably a
Yeah.
very fast way if people just jump into it that don't have, a college education, to be able to just jump into it and go. You could do really fast, really well, and know and be, beyond what your peers, who did go to college, put into it. Again, I'd be shocked if, from a perspective, if you gave me an 18-year-old that started, doing just Office 365 versus the guy who went to, college for 4 years and ready to go. I'd guarantee you, by the age of 25, that the kid who learned Office 365 and hustled SharePoint would be making more money and be much wealthier than any college kid, at the age of 25. So it's
That reminds me. I think I tried to push off a kid to you a couple years ago to be an intern. Do you take any interns so you can get them cleared and have them ready by
Yeah.
their, 18, 19, 20?
Yeah, sometimes I do. I have, I have a 20-year-old kid right now that works for me. That's he doesn't do SharePoint, but he does it, a little bit of cyber work. But yeah, it's amazing how if you work hard, if you learn really fast how much you can just jump into it
Yeah.
and master it. And no one's expecting you to be Joe Dunn on it immediately, but they're expecting you to be but if you will learn and put your head down and learn, give it a month or two, you're probably going to be you're probably going to be 60-70% there after a month, and
Yeah.
within there, it's like, hey, you're within a couple of years, you'll be fine, and be really skilled. And it really just comes down to, can you build a house, with your hands, or did you read it from a book? And a lot of times you just have to jump in there and go with it.
Yeah. Bradley, you got anything? Who do you work for now? I know that you work in classified space, right?
Yeah, I work for DMI.
Okay.
Small company.
Yeah, you're in Texas?
No, I'm in here, Virginia.
Oh, you're in Virginia. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm telling you.
Please.
Oh, telling you to go ahead.
So I transitioned to, IT with SharePoint about 2 years ago. And so mainly I've been kind of stuck in the front end of SharePoint, so making workflows, forms, stuff like that. The standard, like make sites and edit pages. But I'm trying to kind of get more into like the back end, like deal with like server farm or you know what I mean, like management. So I'm just trying to figure out like what would be the best strategy to get that experience on my own, or somehow some way to
That's a good
get
question for you. Scott may know or even better than I do. My generally philosophy on this one is the back end people are at this point in time specifically, they're even more scarce, but it's a profession that's going away.
Yeah.
Because Microsoft, Azure, all the back end people are evaporating those jobs and making them unnecessary in the long term. So in 10 years, you're not really going to see them because they will be unnecessary because the back end mechanics of it does a better job. The future is front end, and the future is where you're at, is building workflows, understanding the business processes, and being able to put essentially
Getting good at Power Automate's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Power Platform. So if you're interested in that side of the cloud, and as Larry said, the back end is going away because no one cares about machines anymore if they're in the cloud.
Right.
And that doesn't make any difference whether it's Azure or AWS. They're swallowing it all up. But you can get more into the admin centers and the general Microsoft admin side of things, Microsoft 365 admin. And a great way to be able to play with that yourself is to get one of the free developer. You could sign up with Microsoft's developer program, get a free Microsoft 365 tenant all for yourself, where you can control every admin center and be the global admin and everything, and go through books and some Nate Chamberlain has a great admin cookbook to teach you. I know it's not, you don't get it from a book, but if you have questions about how to set up your tenant, how to set up users, all from the back end, and then see what you can do with that on the front end, I found that to be really useful over the last year.
Yeah.
I have a developer tenant for myself, and it's free as long as you keep using it every 90 days. It's 100% free from Microsoft because they want you to play in their space. So
there is SharePoint framework too, but that's really niche and not a lot of people do that.
Coder.
Yeah, it's a very steep learning curve, and it's really for very specific purpose. It's not something for just helping out a particular company, not normally. It's pretty nasty.
Basically, we're asking if you want to be a carburetor mechanic, and you're like, "What?
Oh.
Fuel injector's the way to go."
Yeah, exactly. So, but if you're interested in broadening out from the front end and understanding more about the back end, I start with the developer tenant and learn those admin centers.
Yeah.
Because those settings, knowing how to run the admin centers, even if you never get to do it for your job, I have found to be very helpful in advising the people who do run the admin centers. I want to do this for the front end. You need to set this up.
Yep.
I really think Power Automate is super, super critical though. Like somebody who has what you just described, where SharePoint front end and how to do things in SharePoint, if you can get yourself to where you're really a master of Power Automate along with that, you're so much more valuable and versatile in terms of what you can accomplish, because they fit so closely together, and there's so many things that you've got to get done in SharePoint through Power Automate. If you're really good at Power Automate, you're invaluable.
That's at any level of the organization. Working with some of the cloud architects this year, and everybody's setting this stuff up. They're using Power Automate just as much as any front end person. It's not a front end only tool. It is all the way up and down cloud management.
And it talks with all of the other applications in the 365 suite.
Right.
The other
Behind
thing,
the
though,
scenes and
if
in
you
front
are
of the scenes.
truly wanting the feel of working on the back end, as a tenant administrator, you can get your Azure 900 certification and go down those other pathways where you are setting up a whole bunch of, servers inside of Azure,
Right.
learning how to connect your Linux VMs to your Windows VMs in Azure. My fastest, best Windows machine right now is in Azure.
Yeah.
And I can RDP in there from my older equipment or from my phone even. So it depends on what you want to do. I was watching along a video years ago, and that's what gave me the idea. There's no reason for me to ever upgrade my laptop again, because I can always RDP into the fastest, best thing that could be in Azure. So there are some other pathways if you really want. If you're definitely more the introvert, not extrovert, right? SharePoint has a lot of extroverted people working front end, and it makes them great because of the nature of what SharePoint is. But if you are more of an introvert and you don't want to interact with that many people and you want to work on that back end, there are still a lot of options working, Azure stuff. Get your Azure 900 and work from there.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about custom forms development, which might have been what you're talking about, so of course Power Apps platform, depending on which businesses you're working with, there are third-party tools on that front too. I have a very biased slant on that front and very strong opinions. But if you're thinking about custom forms development, you've either got going with the Microsoft Power Apps offering, and there's certainly demand and a reason to do that. There's a ton of stuff you can learn, a ton of people who do nothing but just eat and breathe that every aspect of their day. You could master that. The other opposite direction on forms development would involve use of third-party tools in SharePoint, which of course some people are very much against, and other people will only do it that way. So you've got two camps.
Yeah. I know that, so when I first got involved in this years ago, several years ago, and Scott brought me to, like, hey, SharePoint Saturday, look at this. It was a SharePoint Saturday, and you had all these experts who kind of knew most of it. But as the years have gone on over the last 5 years, people have had to specialize. There's no way to get all of this stuff now in one person's head, normal people's heads. So you have to kind of try to find what you like, but there's so much, you can definitely find what you like. So try a bunch of things, and you may find what you enjoy doing. So is my general recommendation to everybody, because the cloud market is so wide that You can find what you know, as Larry was saying, it's a seller's market out there. So if you find what you like to do, you will get to do that.
And I'll give you another tip on the on the Azure side of things, just being another for the Microsoft files of you guys that you guys are. There's a lot more people, cloud engineers, that are going into AWS and just sort of jumping into that mold, and just because they do a better job marketing on this one, and they get people in training. It's really easy to get people going. If you have niche Azure skills, those are going to be very valuable because there's going to be less of you than there are AWS engineers that have cloud certifications, because it's not it's not that hard to get the AWS cloud certifications, and you can go in and learn, but they're basically just sales tools for them and for you to be AWS cloud gurus. But there are going to be less Azure Azure engineers out there, and you'll eventually be paid more just because there are less of you, and the demand's still just as high. So that's another 2 cents.
Yeah. If I can drag Tom in here, I know you're listening, Tom, or Brendan. You're both with Liquid Mercury. I'm just wondering, do you have any government clients at all? Are you still listening? I know they logged in.
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening. We do, and we have government clients both in GCC moderate and GCC high, and a couple of false steps into GCC DoD, which got a little weird over the summer because Microsoft introduced some new product there, and they weren't really clear on who can buy it and who can't. I see your head bobbing. Yeah. So, I mean, we do, and we try to help people out a lot with CMMC compliance and things like that. And all of our folks are U.S. domestic, but it's a struggle, I'll tell you. The past couple of years have been tough on us. So.
Yeah. So, what are the clients wanting, and that you guys can't provide because you don't have the labor to do it?
Because basically everybody wants everything yesterday, and they want it as cheap as they always got it, regardless of how many people there are to work it. Or we've actually had some customers who were rather large in 2019, but after the pandemic they shrank. Like reverse decimation, you have 100 employees, you go down to 10 employees, and they still expect the same level of service that they had when they were 100 employees. Sometimes they don't win a rebid or what have you, but things change in the landscape, and they still come back and they want NIST 171 or 53 compliance and other things, and they don't understand, like, just because you are a tenth of the size you used to be a couple of years ago before COVID, does not mean that this is 1/10 as difficult as it used to be. Like, a lot of this compliance stuff is really complex, and it takes a lot of hours, and people need to understand that. Yeah. So that's been one challenge that we've been working with, and there are others too, but we're muddling along, and I'm sure you guys probably feel this too, with some of your clients.
Yeah. I know one guy that I've worked with. He was government, and he's like, yeah, we use this company, for our contract support. And I'm like, but she's only one person in that company. He's like, yeah, I know. We're that small. The government agency is like 100 and some odd people.
Right.
Because it's actually like a corporation or something. It's like pseudo government.
Yeah.
And so they've got one contractor that's one deep in her company that does all of their support. Blew my mind.
Funny. It's funny you point that out, because we have sometimes 200 and 300 person companies where a couple of years ago maybe they had 2 or 3 people in IT, and now they're down to 1 person. Or or it's always been the case that they were 50 employees or so, and they always only had one IT guy on staff. And that's kind of the line that I see being drawn, is like, if you have 50 employees, maybe you hire your own IT guy. If you're less than that, maybe you go with an MSP. But when you get up into that mid-sized business of 300 employees or so, maybe you splurge and you have 2 or 3 IT people, or maybe you are shoestringing it and like you're just putting everything on one poor dude who has to suffer through all that shit. So
Yeah.
I feel for them. You know, we support a lot of those kinds of folks, but I think that there are a lot of companies out there that are really stretching it kind of thin, and they're running everything on a shoe leather and shoestring budget. And unfortunately, we've seen far too often in the past couple of years, this is a good way to get compromised from a security perspective. It's not a good place to be. So don't underfund IT.
Yeah.
I know I'm talking to my people when I say that.
Yeah. Talking to the wrong
Well-
crowd right now, because the people who need to hear that are probably not listening in. But that's okay.
Well,
I have
there's-
a so
there-
for everybody, you
there's-
mentioned CMMC compliance,
Mhm.
right? So that's the new thing coming up. This for the
Mhm.
federal market. Have Larry, you know, Tom, what have you guys seen as far as other companies, like even talking about or even understanding what CMMC is going to do to federal acquisition in the next couple of years?
I mean, it's actually a great market for. I'd say it's a great market for people that have to implement it on that side. So it's actually a great sort of a good sort of feeder to be able to to be able to do implementations, because it's very lucrative. It's very expensive to do CMMC and get it up and running, and build in what what all the requirements are, the auditing. Everyone's really worried about the auditing and how much that's going to have an impact on business, but really it's about the implementation, and that's what I don't do that, but I'm assuming Thomas does that based upon what he just said, and that's going to be. That is the bane of most government contractors' existence, is having to deal with this. But it's sort of a necessary evil that we have to go into, and it's a big pain for even our employees. Joe, as you know, just trying to access your your stuff from classified sites. It's like you're trying to jump in through 10 hoops to be able to do it, but it's just part of the part of the deal. But behind the scenes, I'd say Office 365 is kind of ahead in that market, because I know a lot of people that are moving from G Suite to Office 365 specifically for that purpose, and it's not that they don't like Google, it's just because that they don't have the security protocols that are necessary to be able to put into it. And I'm sure they they'll say they do, but then but it's
Comparatively, yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember working for a company, and the CFO was really tied to using Google. He really loved his Google.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Gosh, I'm really. Did you get him off of it finally, Scott? Did you
Yeah,
get him?
yeah,
Did you?
yeah.
Wow, that's great. That's good. Good
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I've seen like a couple other things around, talking with contractors at work and everything like that, and they bring up the topic, and you guys should know this stuff. It's coming, and they're like, "What?"
Yeah. Well,
Never
even
heard
with the cybersecurity memo that came out from the Biden administration about a month, 6 weeks ago, something like that, I was like, wow, that's going to hurt somebody's weekend, because they gave them 2 weeks to implement all sorts of things. And that's kind of short notice whenever you're talking about government and how quickly they turn anything around. So it was kind of interesting. I don't know really how much went on, or if it was okay to just say, well, I have a project objectives and milestones spreadsheet here that we're using, and in 2023 we will achieve our goal, or whatever they might be doing. But
Right. It's kind of the knee jerk, right? Issue a poem that says you're going to do it 3 years from now.
yeah, but I've seen a lot of push to to get the compliance. Compliance is very expensive. Compliance is misunderstood by a lot of folks. They think that they're secure when they are clearly not. Um, and it gets more expensive because once you start to encrypt everything, everything runs slower. So now we have to buy a bigger pipe, to get all of our traffic in and out. We need to do different stuff. Maybe it would be good for some agency that I work for if they would do split tunneling instead of running all of our traffic through the firewall 4 times.
Except they
You know,
won't, because there's a spec that says you can't. So,
I don't know about that.
well, we should talk about that because I'm very interested in that. I know Azure is generally split tunnel, and I see that one requirement in CMMC, and I'm like, WTF? How am I going to get around this one?
Yeah.
So we should talk about that. But
Yeah.
There's a lot of regulations.
Anyway,
There's a lot of regulations that are always put in without thought. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, and you look at them, and sometimes you're like, who thought of this? I have to change my password every 30 days. Even CSF says that's a bad idea now.
yeah, this has
and
been against that for a year.
and there are other aspects where the companies that are implementing this, they have to make business process changes, like C-level people have to give up their admin access to everything in order to have separation of responsibilities, and they hate hearing that.
Yeah.
And you want
Well,
to be
if
that guy that goes in and tells the CEO, you can't have global admin on everything that, yeah, you're the owner, but you're not the owner. Come on.
if the director of your agency has full control to any SharePoint sites, you are doing him wrong and yourself. That's just wrong.
Bad look. It's a bad look.
Yeah. But to get back to the whole federal market and stuff, Larry, how many clients are you guys working on right now? And because labor is so tight, are you trying to even expand and really go after any customers you don't already have in your sphere? Or are you really just trying to grow the customers you have,
I mean, it's a
grow
little bit of
within those
both.
clients?
It's a little bit of both. I'm obviously we're always constantly searching for new talent. That's the SharePoint rec has been up probably in the last it's never left actually. It's always been
Yeah,
up
I know.
and whatnot. And you laugh and it's just true because I'm like, oh, if you could do it, that's great. It didn't stop us from necessarily going after new markets. It's not as not as easy, but it's I think the labor shortage will always be a challenge in between the two because we're able to know what we're doing, but you can probably bid after some work and maybe even win it if the other company that is running it doesn't really know what they're doing, and you basically see what's going on. Like what were these people doing? There's no oversight. There's nothing nothing good going on. There's always that, especially in the federal government space, because a lot of the big integrators are they don't care. They're just there to run the numbers, but they don't understand the technology side of it. And they just say, oh, I'll just hire a guy and they'll run it. And sometimes it works. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's like, okay, so there's always that kind of work. And a lot of those agencies don't know what they don't have, so they have a little ignorance is bliss, even though what they're running is crappy. And it's really just about going in there and finding talent, changing the culture. So it doesn't really stop between the two.
Are you doing a lot of cold solicitation, or are you just waiting for the RFPs to drop?
There isn't a lot of cold solicitations on that. It's really who's made an investment in the 365 space, and who's going to move forward with it, and waiting for that to drop. I think everyone sort of, there's no singular agency that isn't sort of have some part of their body dipped into it anyway. So it's really just about expanding their outreach. But again, a lot of them don't, you'll find a lot of them don't take it seriously. They don't want to put any money towards it because they don't believe, they just believe it's a basic web app that, you put files in. All right. And so, and you and I, we've all talked to those people and they're like, oh yeah, it's just a file sharing system. Right. And you go, oh, okay, got it. And you can do the math from there about what their thought process is. And, really, but they've already probably spent, $1 billion on SAP or something like that. So,
Or the other side of the coin is it's all your files where everybody can download them because you didn't.
Exactly.
If I can throw in a kind of non sequitur, Larry, I'd be interested in hearing from you something that I hear a lot from my staff when they're talking about maybe making a change from commercial to government work. And as you know, over the past 2 years, there have been a variety of reasons why people might have credit issues. Maybe they didn't pay their mortgage on time or they defaulted on a credit card or something like that. Do you guys have a floor when you're looking at like FICO scores or something for an applicant to say this guy is too dicey to get a public trust or a secret clearance or what have you, or like a level that you can say, hey, shoot for a 660 and I think you'll be good. You'll probably get cleared, right?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I personally don't have one. It's really, up to the investigator that decides whether it's high enough or not, or if there's enough reason for it. And a lot of times they could be pretty lenient on certain people, especially if the indiscretions are if they're young and it's just like some unpaid JCPenney credit card from 1999.
Yeah, and their priorities change from year to year. I know under the Bush administration, they were very focused on credit and they didn't care so much about, let's say, marijuana use. But, things shift back and forth over the years and I've certainly seen different issues come and go. But credit was one of the ones that people ask about. They've got credit problems in their past and they want to know, should I even entertain trying to
I would say yes. I mean, I'll give it a shot. It doesn't really hurt to just put in your clearance, and if they reject it, and I really honestly don't see that many rejections.
Yeah.
Eventually they just sort of get through it as long as you're pretty honest and fixing it.
Okay.
They're pretty open about moving forward. There's things that will stop, but if you have a huge criminal record, obviously don't.
Yeah. That's the bigger problem. I used to work for the DoD CAF and the Army CAF before that, where we processed everybody's security clearances, clearance adjudication facility. And I'll tell you, when it comes to financials and your credit and whatnot, the only thing that's really going to hurt you is it enough debt where it could be used as blackmail? Do you have a gambling problem? If you have $60,000 in medical bills and so you filed bankruptcy, that's not held against you at all. If you smoked pot as a kid or even in college or heck, even 2 weeks ago, it's not a problem as long as at that time you didn't have a clearance and in the future you have no intention of smoking it again. If you had a clearance and then you smoke it, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because that's a no-no. Even though state by state it might be legal, federally it's still class 1, and so you can't do it.
And of course the local legislation on this is changing wildly all over the country. So, people feel very comfortable doing some things sometimes, even on Twitter.
Yeah, it is the only reason why. The only reason I have not done that myself, because I have a pain doctor, and instead he gives me opiates because the government doesn't want me to do that. So I take copious amounts of opiates from the 14 screws in my neck. Not that I have a desire to wake and bake anyway, but it's not even something I've been able to really try because I have federal contracts that I support.
Yeah.
So pros and cons with that. I think that a lot of people who favor cannabis give it more credit than it's worth.
I see that too. Yeah.
But those who demonize it probably also don't understand the subject either. So
As far as just with years of having a clearance, I'll say, the financials don't matter so much, like Scott was saying, unless it's something that could be used as a leverage, right? Debt that you don't acknowledge, sort of things, or gambling problem. And then after you get your clearance, it's also monitored, and that again is also $60,000 in medical bills isn't a problem. $6,000 to the casino might be.
Yeah.
So
It varies.
yeah.
Yeah, it and like I say, it comes and goes over time, and I've witnessed different things, and I also see people who are reticent. I've got employees where sometimes they're working for a client who says, maybe we could get you cleared, give you access to this other stuff. Like, I don't know. I haven't paid my taxes in 3 years, something like that.
That'll probably be a bigger problem than having a bad
that
credit
might be
score.
that might be a bigger issue than
That's
credit card.
Then you're edging not into financial. That's edging into the criminal. So criminal, no. Financial, okay. Criminal, no.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people who get behind on their taxes and they don't intend to commit a crime in doing it.
Well, especially with you have your own company, so you're supposed to pay in quarterly, and there's just a lot more going on with it. It's one of the reasons why I don't like 1099. I can't stand 1099.
And
I don't want that feeling of writing the actual check to the IRS every quarter. I can't do that. I hate the government enough. I cannot do that.
Yeah.
I need someone else to rip that out from my paycheck before I ever see it.
They're like, please take this money away from me before it gets me in trouble, because they forget to set it aside, and then they end up, 30 grand in debt to the IRS for a year's worth of income, which is ridiculous. But once you've spent it, it's very difficult to get it back. So you see that a lot in the 1099 market, and it's something that when we're hiring people, we're always very clear. Like, W-2 liabilities on us. 1099, that's your problem. And I've seen people.
You say that, but I know that can affect an employer as well. If you have a lot of 1099 employees and none of them are paying their taxes on time, that can come back and bite the employer on the ass.
I guess if you're, but yeah, no, you could as an employer, you have to be careful because they could be reclassified. If you told them where to sit and when to show up and what to do, then they could be retroactively declared as W-2, and now you owe all the Social Security and everything. Mm-hmm. And I've been on both sides of that argument at various times in the past 20 years. So it's a tough place to be. Like, hey, I should have been an employee. You told me what was what, but you didn't pay into my retirement.
Yeah.
So
Larry, if I can, we've been recording for almost 1 hour. If you got any comments to wrap up, I'd like to hear that. Then we can stop the recording and start another one for Will.
No problem. I guess the sort of the bottom line is the demand is high, supply is low. If you understand, that economics, it is, desperate to, get new people into the door. And salaries, for SharePoint, I feel like are only going up, for the people that take it seriously, and the people that take it seriously, I know, darn. And it's a good thing, overall for this group, and it's something to stick by. Again, it's, because it's, not the, it's not the sexiest, but a lot of times the best paid aren't the sexiest. So really just need to get in there and grow. But that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you want a clearance, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm generally pretty open about, what the salaries look like, and I'll tell you, what happens. But even if you have, little experience, you can move up really fast. It's one of those where experience just jumps up. Give it a couple of years, and people, are making 50% more than they were 2 years ago, just because they jumped into it. So,
and Dan Solutions has a favorable ratings on Glassdoor and everything else. I'll make certain that when I post this to YouTube that I'll put the website out there and the recruiting at Dan Solutions email address, and put that out for folks, because I loved working for you guys.
we love you too.
It's just working from home right now is the best option for
I'll
me.
get it. Yeah, absolutely. I
And,
still,
Thanks to both of you for getting the message out there. We really appreciate the validation and knowing that there are opportunities and people are looking.
yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely. Okay, so I'm going to stop this recording, and then